Was writing your first love, or was performing?
They've existed alongside each other all along, performing just as long as I can remember. I used to force my younger brother to be in plays that I wrote and starred in, and he played all the baddies and the witches or anybody who got a kicking. My poor younger brother played, and I'd put them on outside in the garden or anywhere I could really, and so they always went hand in hand. And at school, started. I wasn't in the school plays, I think, because we were putting. There was a group of us putting on too many shows and plays and things. So because we wrote our own comedy, satire of the school, very critical of the school. Maybe that's why they didn't put us in the school play. Um, so they've always gone hand in hand, um, uh, and I've always had a sort of dual stream to my life.
Mm. That's pretty much what happened with me as well. Performing and writing came along together. I was a member of a youth theatre, and that was
Mm-hmm.
very much how things started for me. And from a coaching
Which
point,
which one do you find actually earns you a living though, if either?
it's always a little bit of if either. Writing was what I truly loved. What happened with me was youth theatre was very shiny and interesting, and it was my social life and some of my job opportunities, directing, things like that came through that. And it was a case of I want to be a writer. Ooh, look, shiny. And suddenly it's 20 years later, nearly, and I'd been involved with theatre companies and I'd done things like that. But what I really loved was writing. So in the end, what happened was at my local theatre, the last show I ever directed before I left to finish my PhD was Improbable Fiction by Ellen Ayckbourn, which is all about a writing group getting together to tell each other why they've done absolutely no writing, having a cup of tea and leaving.
Oh, I
And that
don't
was
know that.
me.
I don't know that Acorn. I love Acorn Place. I don't know that one.
It's absolutely my favorite one. The second half, you're in the non-naturalistic sphere. You walk in at the very end of Act One, something happens involving a storm, and suddenly the protagonist is in all the fantasy worlds of these other writers that we've been
Ah,
learning about
yeah.
in Act One. And
Right, right.
you move through genres. You're in science fiction, you're in historical fiction, you're
Sounds
in
like
yeah.
there was a play by Peter Ustinov called The Love of Four Colonels, where the devil, they have four different colonels who have a chance not to go to hell, and they're allowed to enact a sort of spoof of a drama of their own, and they're each a different nationality. There's a German one and a Russian one and an English one and a French one. And they do the little scenario. So the Russian one is a spoof of a Chekhov play. And the devil, played by Peter Ustinov, no doubt, enters each one to try and trip them up and get them to go to hell.
Mm.
Um, and I remember it as being good fun. I don't know if I'd enjoy it nowadays, but it gave Peter Ustinov the chance to put on all of these
Mm.
different accents because he was fluent in all these languages and accents. And I can remember the Russian one. There's a girl on the swing and saying, "Oh, Moscow," when we get to Moscow, sort of thing. They made me laugh when I was young. Anyway, it sounds a similar sort of thing. You enter four
Yeah.
different fantasies that the devil will enter. The person who's playing the devil will enter and try and usurp
Mm.
what the romantic fantasy is.
Hearing you say that makes me realize that Twisted Branches, in a way, had more in common with what I'd been directing prior to that than I ever realized. Because the whole point for me of a short story cycle, the same house, different generations, was everybody seeing the same story from their own point of view. And somebody's
Mm-hmm.
mental state means that this is a tragedy, but standing somewhere else, you see it a completely different way,
Perhaps you
or you
need to
see. Mm,
expand on that and explain what the premise is, because you just said, "Oh, the same house, different perspectives." But perhaps you need to explain that a
absolutely.
bit, and then I can explain. There's a similar. These are the similarities with Jeremiah Born in Time, which is the same house but different
Mm,
times.
that would be
So
great. Yeah.
go ahead and explain what you mean by the same
Mm.
events through different.
Yeah,
personalities.
absolutely. What I've done is a series of short stories which can exist entirely on their own, but gradually give an overall picture of a family in one house over 5 generations. And depending on whose head you're in at the time, a different person is the bad guy, more specifically,
So
girl.
five generations take us back to how long ago?
Please don't make me do maths. I will panic and not do it.
No, but I mean, are you talking 100 years
It
ago
was
or
no,
500 years ago?
the earliest one in here would have been, oh, it would have been 1970.
Oh, right,
And
right.
that's the tail end of the oldest generation.
And
It's
do you
I
go into the future as well?
No, I stopped on New Year's Day of 2023.
So what do you reckon? I've always
Mm.
wondered about this. What do you reckon a generation is?
Mm.
It's not 100 years. This is a generation. Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? What's a generation? I suppose it's 25 years because that's when you could go from being a child to having children yourself. So that's a generation, is it? What do you reckon?
I oh, I wouldn't find a definition. I would say the different experiences I've had about what generation really means tends to be very, very cultural. You feel like you are with somebody in a generation when, if you think about something like the Beatles versus Wings, or Paul McCartney was the frog song to some people, whereas when Twist and Shout first arrived, and it was the most sort of overtly sexual movement they'd seen on stage. Like the Beatles were so many things that depending on where you turn up, I didn't even understand that at first, and I was a Beatles fan. So it depends on where you show up. So for me, the way I'm defining generation, or I guess the way I'm interested in generations, is we inherit beliefs quite often accidentally from our adults, and we get a certain idea of what's important in the world through that. Like, I mean, I remember waking up at something like 8 years old, walking into the living room where my mum was watching the Rocky Horror Show, and she was so attached to the Rocky Horror Show that she couldn't bear to turn it off. The Rocky Horror Show became very important to me of itself, but probably also because I felt like it was a kind of rite of passage. Might sound wrong in context, but it made me feel like I'd been inducted into something. And The Young Ones was actually another one. I remember my older cousins watching it and feeling terribly grown up because I could then watch it with them. So that
Mm-hmm.
that for me, those are memories for me. Whereas if you ask somebody about those same things, their experience into it with peers might be different. Um,
I've always had
mm,
a situation because I've had big generational differences in my marriages. I've
Snap.
been married to someone much younger than me, and I'm married to someone older than me. And so I had stepchildren and a grandchild even when I was under 30.
Mm,
Um, and so these generational things were all muddled up for
mm,
me. I remember finding that my stepchildren were into the Doors and thinking how weird because I remember when the Doors came out and Hendrix and things like that, and the generations find other stuff, don't they? And
mm.
recycle it, and it means something new to them, maybe, as you say.
Yes.
But I've always liked that feeling when you've got grandparents, great grandparents,
Yeah.
grandchildren, that all of the generations together, because there's much more that they share
Mm.
than that differentiate them. We go on about Generation Z and Generation X, and where are we at the moment? Who are the? I lose track of that. I'm generation. I don't know what generation. I'm 70 years old. I don't know what generation. Am I a baby boomer?
I think
Um,
so.
right. But you see,
Just
a
on the
lot
cusp.
of my friends are, much older than me, and a lot of my friends are younger than me. Not much younger than me, because
Mm.
but my kids are. It's strange. I've got grandkids who are the same age as my kids, so I find generational mix uh, really nice when they're all mixed
Mm.
up.
It is nice. I mean, I have a partner who's 20 years older than me, and I grew up in a theatre
All
where
right,
all of
so
my friends, yeah, absolutely. I've always been in a situation where having friendships of different ages was the norm. And I found that much more
hmm.
natural than being at school, where it was weird if you were friends with people in the year above or below. I always
Yeah,
thought,
exactly, exactly.
stupid,
So
isn't it?
it's odd that we both seem to have
Mm,
written books that are trying to somehow grasp hold of that, because in my book, it's in the same house. Jeremiah Bourne is he lives in a house in Blackfriars Road and finds himself transported to 1910, but in the house. The time travel is not time and space in my book.
mm,
And there are scenes set in the future, in 100 years from now, in that same house, where there's people in the future are no wiser than us. They're having annoying residents association meetings. And there are gradual reveals for him to understand. His job is to try and understand why he's got this ability to travel. He's inherited it. It's about inherited memory, as you were saying. Um, inherited memory, like, I don't know, did you see that? There was a thing going around on Twitter, the beaver. There was
no,
somebody brought up a little beaver in a flat. It had never seen another beaver, never seen a river, never seen a tree. It had been brought up as a baby, and as soon as it could walk, the first thing it did was build a dam in the flat between two of the rooms along, and it
gosh,
dragged a waste paper bin and a cushion and some kids' toys and built a functioning dam. Now, how did it know to
how
do
did
that?
it know?
How do birds know how to build a nest? Their first nest is as
Mm,
good as their last nest. They don't need to go to nest school to make a nest.
mm,
So my sort of time travel premise is that we are inheriting more than we realize. There's a writer called Rupert Sheldrake who coined the phrase morphic resonance
mm,
to explain why things are the way they are. Um, they're like a sort of mime, a mimetic repetition of what went before. And that's what we're gradually inheriting, memories. And I just got excited by those concepts and thought, what if in the future the memory became a controllable thing?
mm,
And then it's a bit of a leap of faith to imagine, yes, you can travel in time using inherited memory, and you can remember things that didn't happen to you, maybe.
mm.
And so, yeah, at that point, I'm obviously completely out to lunch. And the book
And
is it's sort of a bit genreless. It's like it's historical, it's sci-fi, it's mystery, comedy, futuristic, time travel, adventure, romp. I
with very
mean, I'm
clear
not very good at
ad,
all the categories of the
yeah,
genre categories, so I put them all in.
but also with a very Douglas Adams style narration, that there is that voice that is
Yeah,
the sort of sense of humor of the universe that comes into it.
that's right. There's a sort
Mm,
of cynical or skeptical sense of humor, like Terry Pratchett as well. I read
yes.
the audiobooks. I mean,
Mm,
I'm the voice of the unabridged audiobooks of many Terry Pratchett books, and um, I had a big sort of imprint from Terry Pratchett, and that
mm.
what did you call it? That was quite good. The humor of the universe or something. What did
It's
you use? That's
the
that sort of
the
put your finger
universe's
on it. Yeah,
sense of humor for me is
yeah,
why I love Douglas Adams as much as I do, and it is absolutely the same with Pratchett. I don't know if you could actually see, you
yeah.
probably can't from here. There's Death and Rincewinder on top of the bookcase over there, and
No,
that's
I can't see that.
one of my influences as well. But just coming back to what you
Yeah,
said about
yeah.
memory, that does chime for me greatly, because both in these stories and for me growing up, the liberal Jewish tradition is not these stories definitely happened in terms of the Bible. If they happened, great, lovely. But the point of the stories was always, what do they say about you? What do they mean about you? And when you take something like Discworld or Truckers, the Gnome series, it is absolute psychological reality. There is so much wisdom in it. It is more our world than our world, which is what fantasy can do. And although mine is not fantasy, it's still speaking in that storytelling tradition that as you gradually put your jigsaw together of everybody's slightly warped perspectives, the way everybody's sort of looking at each other, but really seeing their own hang-ups, insecurities, what's going on for them. And for me, that's fascinating. That's why I wrote a book using memory rather as my chronology, that it does jump all over the place. If you read the stories chronologically, you'd miss, without spoiling this to high heaven, but you'd miss the comedy, you'd miss the tragedy, you'd miss the storylines that were going on in individuals' heads, the things that join up for them. And so I used memory like that. And in my sort of commentary on us working together, I was saying, you're doing with time what I'm doing with memory. But really that is the human experience, that we don't live chronologically. Every time we have a conversation, we've got a memory of something that happened 20 years ago or an association with this. We don't just live in a straight line. So one of my favorite novelists, Maggie O'Farrell, when she was asked about why she doesn't write or doesn't publish novels that are chronological, why you move about in time, she said, because that's actually more natural, because that is how we live. We don't just start here and move forward. We're
It's
engaging.
also very unreliable. I recently had during the lockdown, because I'm struggling trying to write a memoir at the moment, and I had we booked, me and Peter, my ex double act partner, we booked 4 hour and a half, 2 hour conversations during the lockdown, and we thought we'll go through this and see what we can remember, because we've worked together since 1975, four, and our memories of the same events are completely different. Not just a little bit different.
Mhm.
He has recorded in his memory. Of course, he's wrong, and I'm right.
Of course.
Mine is 100% accurate, and I don't know what he is thinking. He's invented it all. But there are events which to me were pivotal, that he has no recollection of at all. And even when I reminded him of it, he had no recollection. And then there are events which weren't very important to me. This spoof band we made, not Bad News, it was another band, Nice Weather. That was like, yeah, we did that, and it was a gig we did, and it's forgotten. But for him, that's what his memory has hung on to, that event. That's when he was happy doing that Nice Weather. There was a band called Nice Weather, it was a hippie band, and we did a spoof of it, and he's hung on to that for uh, how long ago is it? 45 years.
Mhm.
That's his memory. My memory is that he walked out. He was rude to the boss of that gig and walked out, and I was still furious with him 45 years later, sort of thing. So we have completely different memories, and that fascinates me as well. Is that how many universes are there that you would go back to if you were to use memory as your vehicle? How many places are there to go?
And in true Pratchett trousers of time fashion, we
Yeah.
we pick the leg we go down, and the definition of human
Is that
experience is we can't.
yeah?
Yeah.
Is that I've not heard that one. But Trouser of Time. Where is that? Which
I
do you
will
know?
I will
Where's that from
find
in
it.
Pratchett?
I will put that in the
Yeah,
show notes and I will find it, which is a
I
very, very
love that.
confident way of saying I can't remember where to find it,
Yeah, yeah, do it.
but I
And
will.
tell me it again. That's good.
The
In
Trousers of Time.
Trouser of Time, and you choose which leg
Okay.
you go down.
I will just say about Pratchett that he was instrumental in my life changing, because I lost a friend to cancer when I was 25 and we'd been in youth theatre together and we'd done some Pratchett plays together. I formed a theatre company to do a production of Night Watch for Macmillan Cancer Support, to raise money for Macmillan Cancer Support in memory
Oh,
of Sophie. And that was when I got out of my terribly sensible, soul destroying job at I won't name the newspaper in question, but I was about to say its nickname and I won't. And that was when I came back to teaching Lambda exams, directing shows, found my way back to writing, writing, and that was very, very important to me. But with Pratchett and with particularly Night Watch, where it's all about wearing the lavender in memory of the fallen, and they do go back and they do go back and check their memories, and of course things are not as they appeared, and there is a whodunit within that. But fundamentally, what I think he's
And is that book called Night Watch?
Night
No,
Watch, yes,
I don't think I know that one. Is it Grimes?
it's
Is it
yeah,
Grimes?
Sam Vimes,
Some
Sam
Vimes,
Vimes,
not Grimes. Vimes, yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's them. It's
It's not the one with the dragons, the lady with the dragons.
she is slightly off stage because she's giving birth at this point,
Oh right, no,
and
I don't know
she's
that
in the
one.
shadows of this story. It
And
happens to
it's
him
not
while
guards, guards, guards.
it's it's after guards, guards. Wow, I haven't
Right.
had this knowledge tested for a long time.
Yeah,
There was a
yeah.
time when I would know all of the answers to these.
Right. So
I can tell
you're a
which
you're a
depth they're
Pratchett
on.
nerd.
He changed my life. I'm also friends with Rihanna, so that's another
Oh,
thing.
right.
So
So am I, but
yeah,
I've never
yeah.
actually met her.
Oh really?
Only we're friends online. Yeah.
Oh, because I wondered at her
She's
book
been very
notes.
supportive, and likewise her fun book about witches
Hmm.
at the moment.
Yeah,
Was just
she actually gave me two of the octopuses that are in gold over there. It was my birthday the other day. Those are from
oh
Rihanna.
right. Oh,
Now, what were the
fantastic.
questions I was actually asking you?
Right. Now where
One,
were we? Yeah.
we're not there, but I'm just going to go there anyway. Given that our Nigel Planer and Friends event is at the newly regenerated Riverside Studios next Tuesday.
Yes, absolutely. Tuesday the 30th of January. When you say next Tuesday, we don't know
Yes,
when this is going out. So Tuesday the 30th of January at 7 o'clock, lasting
yes,
an hour and a half,
yes,
down by 8:30, whereupon we will sign books um,
absolutely,
and sell them to you. All books.
absolutely.
Books by not books by
Well, not all
ticket, but
books.
no,
Other people might find
these
that
kind of
rather
books.
difficult.
That's my
That
one.
these kind of
There we
books,
are.
yes,
These kind of books. We've
these
both got
kind of
those.
books.
I've also got a poetry book out at the moment, um, making other plans. It's my sort of
Mm,
collected works as a
mm.
poet. So I'll bring a
Which,
few of those along if anybody's interested. And
yeah.
I've just been on tour
Mm.
doing poetry readings with Henry Normal. So and then readings from Jeremiah Bourne. So that's what I'm sort of on at the
Mm.
moment. But sorry, I interrupted you to give a
Absolutely
plug
fine.
to our gig.
That is exactly how I like to be interrupted. That's more than fine. We are all in very much in London in what we're writing in different ways. And I found that with your poetry as well. I could feel where you were was I don't want to say important because I'm not the writer, that's for you to say, but it was very much part of the emotional landscape. Felt place did feel like it was in there. And I found with Twisted Branches setting it in Richmond and it being a place near where I live, but not where I live. I did notice how, without it being an intention, I keep being drawn back to certain places that were in Richmond. So I just embraced it for Twisted Branches, but it had already turned up in various ghost stories and other things that I'd had published. That
Mm.
you get your Wessex of your own, you get your geographical
Yeah,
landscape.
yeah,
I think.
yeah. I mean,
What's
mine's
yours like?
well, I'm southeast London. I've been
Mm,
for 20 years, and also I went to school around here, but I am a West Londoner.
mm,
And Jeremiah Bourne's Blackfriars Road it goes up to Bloomsbury Square, but it's basically here, south of Southwark, basically. Um, and I'm absolutely fascinated by the history in this area because it looms up at you. I mean, our Tesco's, for example, there's a Tesco's just around the corner from me with a forecourt, all newly built, but there's a stone in the ground there, which is 300 AD with chiseled words in Latin in it. That they obviously couldn't move that, so they had to build a Tesco's round it. And that's no surprise around here. There's history going back 2,000 years all around you. And then the other sections, I did live southwest London, Hammersmith, Fulham. I don't have that. I wrote a couple of novels, and I had a big attachment to when I lived on the river in West London, and in those novels, there's a presence of Hammersmith and a film script I'm trying to get off the ground at the moment, likewise. But in Jeremiah Bourne, it's the only other sort of part of London that he goes to, funnily enough, is Twickenham. And he goes there 100 years ago because I'm fascinated by what those houses, some of those big houses around by Marble Hill Park, would have, had quite middle-class couples in them with servants. There was a huge amount of, half the women in the country, I think, were in domestic service 100 years ago, 1910. And that fascinates me. And then what it was like, one of my characters is obsessed with the 1970s. And as a escape route, she flips herself back to 1973 in Twickenham, where I happened to be in Twickenham on the Squat in 1973. And I still have a lot of strong memories of that era, of the sort of the flared trousers, what you'd expect from me, quite honestly.
I do need to tell you at that point that it's really not just you, Flares.
Well, but that might be my fault.
It kind of is.
That might be my bad influence.
It kind of is. I wasn't going to admit that, but apparently I am now admitting that.
Yeah, yeah. But 73, particular sort of turnaround year, I feel, and I've really enjoyed writing. There's a sequence I've written where she escapes back there and talks to a load of, she sort of, on Eel Pie Island, she meets a load of stoners, and there's quite a funny campfire scene with the stoners, which is almost, I just put myself back there, and it's fairly accurate. I wasn't doing much inventing in that dialogue, which is totally ludicrous dialogue, but a lot of dialogue was, it seems to me, with stoners in 1973.
Of course, when you're on the inside of it, nothing is ridiculous. It depends where
Ooh,
you're
I don't
standing
know.
as narrative voice.
I
Well,
suppose so. I suppose so.
yeah, but you get the best
most
of
of it
both
seems
worlds with
ridiculous.
narration.
Yes, you do. And footnotes. I've enjoyed taking a
Yes,
leaf out of Pratchett's
yes.
book. I very much enjoyed uh, pedantic footnotes that start to sort of develop their own plot lines in Jeremiah Born in Time. They start to take over the book really, and it's an excuse to get in a lot of information as well, because there's a lot of quite interesting bits when you're researching the history, particularly stupid things people have done, bad ideas that caught on, and it's quite fun to expose all that. But also, there's a little subplot about me and my editor who doesn't like what I'm doing, and then they give me a new editor, and I feel guilty because was it me who complained about the old editor that got rid of the old editor, and then I get another editor, and there's a whole kind of comic subplot in the footnotes, which I very much enjoyed doing that. When I do the second book, I'm hoping to increase that. Trouble is, footnotes go small print, don't they? Maybe my
I
footnotes
do.
should be just start taking over the whole
Yeah, you could
page.
go really meta and just have the main bit
Yeah,
about that size and the footnotes 3/4 of the page.
yeah. Have the main bit in small print and the foot.
You've actually made me think more on how meaning and form work together, because obviously as a memoirist you're gonna be thinking those things anyway. That I mean, my favorite memoir is Toast by Nigel Slater, with the
Oh, I know the one
where
you
it's all
mean. Yeah,
recipe
I haven't read
cards.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Not important, but recipe cards. This is Toast, this is Angel Delight. His memories going through life are recipe cards. He's a chef. Food was how he got out of the bad situations and into the life of his own that he created. And it's interesting hearing you say that about the footnotes, that what really does come across with that is, or what it seems like to me as a reader, is what was on your mind was not. Now, how can I make this most conventionally readable? I felt like there was your personality, what you were trying to say about the world, and the humor that you had, the footnotes, the sort of influence of Pratchett. The form and the subject matter really need to find each other in order to, I think, just be the writer that one is. So for me, this had to be a short story cycle because it couldn't just be a short story collection. This is about memory. This is about community. This is about how people look at each other. So the form of a cycle where they all relate to each other was absolutely part of what I was saying when writing
Hmm.
that. And I
Hmm.
guess it is the
Hmm.
same for you that we can't go, just to come back to where we were earlier, we can't go back up the trousers of time. We can't go and check if we're right or if, our business partner is right about our memory. And if
Yeah,
we
yeah,
could,
yeah.
everything would be different. So I'm wondering maybe how did maybe the footnotes come into that somehow, that it is maybe related to memory or how we think.
And I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know. I think I just have a. Uh, ooh, what's that? It's a notification. I don't know if you heard that.
No,
It came
I
in my head.
didn't.
Anyway,
I didn't.
um, I don't know what it is. Um, it's it's lost my thread now.
Footnotes.
There we are. That's the bit that'll be in the Instagram. Oh, I've lost my thread.
Oh, that's the
Um,
bits they'll enjoy.
yes. Um,
Very human.
yeah, the footnotes. It's more.
Mm.
I think I have a low boredom threshold, and I don't
Mm.
like. You know, reading something with fresh eyes is really difficult. If you read it again and again, it's hard to see on a rewrite what the reader will think because I get you get sort of snowblind,
Mm.
and footnotes are just a wonderful technique of putting yourself in.
Mm.
So you're not pretending that you're this great person who knows it all. You're just lost. You you're putting how lost you are in at the same time, and it's a diversion for you when you're writing. You think, oh, that'll be great.
Mm.
I can do that for the afternoon now, and I don't. I'll solve that tomorrow. I don't know how to solve that bit, so I'll just. It's is that called meta? Is that what meta is? Putting yourself in?
I think it's just the number of layers of which you're commenting on, commenting on, commenting. It's just funny hearing it because I think for me, footnotes would, in terms of my writing rather than reading, certainly with my PhD, that was the bit that bored me to tears was the
Ah,
formatting and the having to
the
think
footnote.
about it. So,
IBID, yes, that thing when you have to IBID, because you referred to it before. But that's an academic situation, isn't it, where you have to justify
mm,
every quote, everything you've remembered. Whereas the
mm,
joy with a comic footnote is you can say, I think it was so and so who said, and then you can say, but, and maybe it wasn't. I can't remember properly, and
mm.
you that's fine.
Do you know what? I just wonder because I have enjoyed prose writing so much more than performing, and I've done obviously nothing like the scale of what you've done, but I've done sketches with other people, and I've done but been in various other situations. I personally, whatever this says about me, enjoy being God of the universe and getting on with it in a way that is I find easier. Whereas it's kind of interesting that even when you're not performing, even when you are the solo writer and it is in prose, you've ended up having a conversation with yourself through footnotes.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm not. I'm not. What's the word? I'm not the protagonist of my own life. I feel much happier sharing. Even during the day, you know, the morning's work, you would allow yourself to write freely, and the afternoon you can use your critical eye. That's like a dialogue with yourself. I mean, I think all of it's dialogue
Mm,
in my mind. It's all movable. The
mm.
text is fluid. You're everything's movable, and it's all about a dialogue.
I always
And
start with
I feel
dialogue.
uncomfortable if it's. I don't mean dialogue, actual quoted dialogue. I mean a dialogue
Mm,
in your head.
mm,
Um, Life is a dialogue. There's always other possibilities, and that sort of I think Lee. I mean, it's a commercial suicide maybe because Lee Childs is the opposite of that. He does almost like a computer game story. The protagonist is at the center. Everything flows out from his
Mm.
experience. He will kill anyone who gets in his way. And we're going through to the end, and it's a linear story. And that sells, I think. But
Mm.
I, you know, I even if I tried, I don't think I could manage to do that. I think I would get too bored and too comical.
Mm.
You know, as you said, the comedy of the universe is, or what did you say? It was a good phrase.
I'll have to play it back to find out what I actually said,
Yeah,
but what
yeah,
what I roughly said was,
yeah,
do you know, I will play it back because I can't find it exactly, but it was the sense of humor of the universe.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's what I
And
find with Pratchett or
that
Adams or yours.
absolutely, and that keeps interfering. If you try and write, if you or I were to try and write a Lee Child's book, that
We'd fall
that goes
asleep.
from A to B into C. No, you'd start getting the comic stuff of the
Mm,
universe comes in and messes
yeah,
it up
yeah.
because I just like to take the piss, really.
I'm aware that I promised you a break before your next meeting, which I'm in serious
Oh yeah,
danger
I think we ought
of
to wind up now
flying.
because I've got yeah, and I
Um,
think that notification I got was the next
ah,
meeting.
okay.
So we ought to wind up now. Is
Well,
there anything else we need to discuss?
Uh, just to say that that gorgeous image of dialogue and the argument with self, that's exactly how I write as well. It always begins as an argument, or a discussion. It becomes characters finding each other through talking to each other and finding their differences in the
Yeah,
same.
yeah,
And in terms of the Writers' Gym podcast, I think we should dare our listeners to have a go at that if they haven't already, because it's a lovely
I'm
way in.
sure they all have. Yes.
Yeah.
Okie doke. Well, lovely to
Okay.
speak to you and see you next Tuesday, the
See
30th
you.
of January at, well, it starts at 7. We're going to get there a bit
Yeah.
early.
We'll be there earlier, but
Yeah, yeah.
see all of you out there at
Okie
7
doke.
p.m. on
Yeah.
Tuesday the 30th at Riverside
Bye
Studios.
bye. Cheers.